Good afternoon. Thank you both for taking time to talk with us today. We're with Representative Lori Chavez-DeRemer and Representative Janelle Bynum, who are running for the 5th Congressional District. I'm wondering if, Lori, if you wouldn't mind going first and talking a little bit about why you're running for re-election and why you think voters should send you back for another term.
Well, thank you. And thank you all for being here today. I'm Lori Chavez-DeRemer, proud mom of twin girls who are now 30 years old and soon to be a grandmother. So I'm excited about that. So I now make sure that I intro with that. I've been a wife for 33 years and a small business owner for almost 20 here in Oregon. And now I'm proud to serve Oregon's 5th Congressional District as the current Congresswoman. But before I got started there, I grew up in a small farm town community. I'm the first to go to college in my family and graduate, and then really was involved in local politics as city councilor, mayor of Happy Valley, one of the fastest growing cities in Oregon, for all the reasons of keeping politics local, wanting my family, my children to grow up in a thriving, safe community. Now honored to serve as the Congresswoman. And today, I think what you'll see is why Oregon's 5th District are going to vote me in again, because I'm the best fit for the district. You'll see from my bipartisan track record, I did what I said I was going to do. I think voters will know that they can trust me. I have a staunch leading record there in Congress of over 300 bills that I'm on. Over 80% of those are bipartisan. And I think that that's representative of Oregon's 5th District. And you'll see that today when we highlight the stark contrast between myself and my opponent. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Janelle, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and why you think voters should make a switch.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Janelle Bynum. I am a proud mother of four, an electrical engineer, a local business owner, and a four-term state legislator. I know that residents of Oregon's 5th Congressional District deserve better than what they've been getting, whether it's the chaos in Washington, the confusion, the lack of any movement on any real material issues. They deserve better, and I believe I'm the one to carry that message. I've been engaged for the last 8 years in making sure that Oregonians receive protections with respect to reproductive care, mental health care. They can count on me for protecting their civil rights. They can count on me for making sure that women are paid just for the same work as men. They can count on me to make sure that I am standing up for the economy. I was the chief leader on the CHIPS Act, bringing American manufacturing back to the shores of Oregon. So these are the things that our Oregonians have said over and over again that are important to them. I've been around the district. They've told me that housing is on their agenda, that the economy is on their agenda, that healthcare, access to healthcare, whether it's reproductive healthcare, whether it's mental health care, or just going to see their doctor and getting their prescription drugs. And then finally, they've told me that they want us to focus on making sure that the environment is something that is protected, whether it's old growth and mature forests or our clean air and clean water, whether it's for human consumption or making sure that our fish and wildlife have adequate water. So those are the things that are on Oregonians' minds. Representative Chavez-DeRemer has not done that. You'll see a very strong contrast in the way that we think about lawmaking, the way that we think about leading, and what we can deliver on.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll just kind of bounce back and forth in terms of who starts first. So Janelle, if you can respond to this question. There's Oregonians are concerned about the state of the economy, and both presidential candidates are proposing a variety of ideas for either cutting taxes, imposing tariffs, not taxing tipped income, et cetera. Can you talk about the kinds of policies that you would support or push for if you were elected to this position?
Well, I think what's really important for Oregonians is a strong economy here. And as I just mentioned before, doing the Oregon CHIPS Act and building off the federal legislation was key to rebuilding our economy here. So what does that mean? Making sure that our young people are ready and engaged for the workforce of tomorrow, making sure that there are jobs here that are family wage jobs, and then making sure that they're educated so that they can take on those jobs. So number one, it's about building an economy economy here that works for them. The second part is I'm really encouraged that the current administration has worked on prescription drugs. We know that access to healthcare is something that's so important to Oregonians. And, Republicans haven't moved the needle on negotiating healthcare and prescription drug prices. They tried to eliminate Obamacare, and people actually liked it even more. So these are the types of I would say, agenda items that are really important for us to continue to work on. Growing a strong economy here in Oregon, reducing prescription drugs. There's also reducing and tackling housing costs, whether it's with reducing red tape or growing the number of housing units, which I know that Governor Kotek has committed to. These are the on-the-ground things that really make it come alive, rather than just, pie in the sky ideas that are happening in Washington.
Okay. And just to follow up a little bit more on that, in terms of the tax cuts passed under former President Trump, is that something that you would want to see expire, or do you have any thoughts in terms of what aspects you would want to retain, perhaps?
Well, I would say the devil's in the details, right? So it matters what we're proposing, how we're going to pay for it. But here's one thing that I know is very clear. Republicans aren't taking care of average Americans. They're taking care of billionaires. And that's the difference. Lori Chavez-DeRemer is going to rubber stamp these tax cuts, rubber stamp what the Republican Party has put forth. And we know that Americans need better than that.
Great, thank you. And Lori, same question for you. Just the economy is a huge issue for Oregonians. The presidential candidates are offering a variety of ideas, from cutting taxes to not taxing tipped income. What are the policies or ideas that you would support or push for in a second term if elected?
Well, thank you. Actually, it's the number one issue that most people are concerned with. We know everyday prices are higher and higher, and Mrs. Bynum has been in office for 9 years, and she says she's tackled all these things. And we have a report out today. Housing prices are up 47% across this country, and rent is up 40% across the country as well. And it's being hit harder in the state of Oregon than many other states. Some of the things that I have worked on specifically to address housing affordability and economy: the Tax Relief for American Families Act. I made sure that I was on that bill. A child care investment tax credit, expanding that, making sure that we're helping our everyday average Oregonians. Tax relief bill, income housing tax credit, where we can increase more flexibility in our housing vouchers. We know in the state of Oregon that land constrictions are vast, and the policies that come forward from the state legislature have not made that any easier. We want to make sure that voters know that Mrs. Bynum has voted 9 times to increase.
It's Representative Bynum. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that we had agreed on first
You
names.
can call me Janelle, or you can call me Representative.
Labor endorsements as well. We want to make sure that we're covering our labor as well. And when we talk about the CHIPS Act and the economy, we have to make sure we have those protections in place as well. If we're talking about the economy as a whole, gas prices are up, housing's up. We've done nothing for permitting reform in the state of Oregon, and I want to make sure that we're taking those on. I'm on bipartisan bills across the district. Childcare is one of the main issues that Oregonians are taken aback by. Women and families are having to choose between going to work or staying home with their children because we don't have access to more childcare. In listening to the Farm Bill session that I had too, in the state of Oregon with fellow Congresswoman Andrea Salinas, childcare was one of those things. The cost of childcare has gone up. 22% of an average Oregonian's income goes to childcare. Gas prices, food prices. Tax credits you talked about, whether they're going to expire. I can tell you this: if those Trump tax credits get expired, you're going to see single homes drop from a tax credit of $15,000 a year to $8,000 a year for a single family. That's important that we make sure that we're protecting everyday average Oregonians. So Measure 118, that will cripple our economy. I've been vocally public about opposing Measure 118. That's going to be on the ballot. I have not heard Representative Bynum, Janelle Bynum, say anything in opposition to Measure 118, and that has been bipartisan. We have to make sure that we represent all Oregonians in Oregon's 5th district. And I can tell you this: if we are not bipartisan in making sure that we have be center forward and policy driven, we're going to lose our economy here in Oregon, and it's going to be devastating. We're seeing more and more businesses close because of crime, because of the economy. I look forward to continue to address those And I've worked across the aisle tremendously, not only with Oregonian representatives, but with other members of Congress across the aisle to make sure that they know that I want to represent all of Oregon's 5th Congressional District, not to mention tolling. I came out in opposition of tolling right here in Clackamas County, which represents 75% of this district. An average Oregonian cannot afford $30 a day to cross any sort of tolling when there's no expansion in the roads, there's no decongestion. And Janelle Bynum voted for the transportation package that increased that tolling to make sure that that was included. So we have a lot of separations. I've been endorsed by labor unions, 18 of them, actually 19 as of this morning. Why? Because that is everyday average Americans and everyday Oregonians who trust me to get the job done.
So are you referring to the 2021 bill? Because if I understand correctly, Representative Bynum, did you sponsor or co-sponsor legislation regarding a ban on tolls in 2023?
The 2017 House bill that she supported, the
Okay.
transportation bill, included tolling. She supported that.
I voted to endorse making sure that tolling was not moving forward because we knew that in the Happy Valley, Clackamas, Westland areas, that the tolling proposals that ODOT was putting forth were not feasible. So I think the Congresswoman has mischaracterized my message. What's actually more important, and this is kind of a hallmark of what I am proposing, it is very important to me to have an economy that is inclusive. And what the Congresswoman, the current Congresswoman in her last term, is proposing is that only some people get to participate in this economy. She's making sure that that the Republican cronies have access to things like housing. The rate at which housing has gone up, and I've seen it because I have young children who are in the housing market as renters. They're college-age students. I've seen it go up. Why? Because of collusion. Why? Because these large corporations with private equity have taken the market by storm, and they've made sure that what they do is they drive up the price, they generate concessions, and they make you think you're getting a deal when you're not. They're buying up whole communities, making you think that you have access to housing, and you don't.
And let
It's
me
who gets to participate. No one is getting to participate except for the big guys.
I do want to follow up on this and then also follow up with you, Lori, about housing. But what specifically would you say has been Representative Chavez-DeRemer's role in that aspect in terms of driving up housing or ensuring that it's only available to a certain level?
She thinks that we should teach our kids more about home ownership and we should reject this idea of being a long-term renter. I'm not sure how you ever get to be a homeowner if everything is stacked against you. If you can never save because rents are so high. If, for instance, when we think about making sure that children have food at school, if you're paying for groceries and you're trying to do everything you can to make sure that kids are fed at school, when you reject SNAP, then you never allow a family to save enough to get ahead. So she's proposing that you save and that you think and that you wish and that you teach. But at the end of the day, if there is nothing left over for you to save, how do you ever participate in the housing market on the full terms? It's only meant for the rich.
And Lori, if you could respond to, or just this follow-up question, what have you and Republicans done specifically to kind of move the housing market to make it more affordable or to just address that crisis?
Yeah, so for sure she mentioned that I don't support renters. Again, rental costs have gone up over 40%. I have been on a bill to expand the housing voucher for rental vouchers, making sure that there are those tax credits. You know, I'm endorsed by the realtors. I'm endorsed by the home builders. We want to build more homes. We recognize that we have to have more housing affordability, but with land costs, starting with the land costs in Oregon, when you're talking about energy as well, the energy sector, it makes costs go up. There's been no expansion. I'm working across the aisle to say, where can we build? Instead, we do House Bill 2001, which was rejected by most Oregonians, except Representative Bynum, who thought this was a good plan to expand affordability. But I can tell you this, if affordability was her number one issue and she wants her children to be able to purchase a home, as my child has a home, she's working 3 jobs to pay that mortgage. It has been
You should
difficult.
be working 3 jobs to pay a
So,
mortgage. Like,
excuse
that doesn't even make any sense.
Well, with an increase in taxes, that's exactly what happens when we don't have regulatory framework that's adjustable for our families every day. Prices are going to go up. There's only so much to go around. So we have to do everything in Congress to be partners with our state partners and our local partners to make sure that we're expanding housing affordability. We're having all different types of housing. We're making sure that people can choose to live where they want to live, work where they want to work, and be safe and comfortable. That has not been the case under Representative Bynum. That is why I'm endorsed for apprenticeship programs. That's why I'm endorsed by the home builders. That's why I'm endorsed by the realtors. They trust me to do the job to make sure that I'm working with them to get the flexibility they need in order to produce that housing right here in the state of Oregon and across the country. And I build those coalitions across the aisle. I know Mrs. Bynum thinks I side with one side, but here's the deal. I am the most bipartisan member.
You don't know what I think. What I remember is living in Happy Valley.
I would actually,
utilities
if
popping
Laura
out
can respond,
because
because
nobody could buy those homes.
Okay.
That's what I remember.
I'm the most bipartisan member of the Oregon delegation. I work with my colleagues across the
You're
aisle.
a bill mill.
So actually, let's, I'd like to move on to another
you.
question.
So I look forward to continuing to work on this issue because it's important for all the Oregonians to have the help they need from their federal partners, state partners, and local partners.
So, Lori, if you can go first on this question. Federal government is once again facing the prospect of a shutdown as House Speaker Johnson has been unable to put together a short-term funding bill that can win a majority. One of the hangups is that he wants to attach a bill backed by Trump that requires people to show proof of citizenship to register to vote. Do you support tying that to a bill preventing a shutdown?
Well, I've been on record every time that there's a continuing resolution that's come to the fore that I do not support government shutdown, and I will not support a government shutdown. I know the SAVE Act is attached to that. I supported that we want all Americans to vote in free and fair elections, and we want to make sure that they're American voters. But I have expressed my leadership. I oftentimes go against leadership. I want to make sure that I'm representing Oregon first, and I have proven that time and time again. I've walked the walk, I talk the talk. So we go back to Washington this week. I've talked to leadership as of this morning. I will be in support of continuing resolution to keep this government open for several different reasons. We have to make sure that we're making sure that our military is paid for. We have to make sure that everyday Oregonians, the federal government workers who support all of the programs that we want to have here in Oregon, stay employed. And I have done that every single time and will continue to do so.
And are you confident that the rest of your caucus is committed to keeping federal government open?
Well, my goal is to share what Oregon values are. And every single time I go to leadership and I let them know, I will not stand for shutting down this government. Sometimes we have to buck our party. That's important. That's how we represent. We're a representative government of Oregon's 5th district. We are a split district. Anybody who doesn't recognize that or understand that, it's nonsense. And we've had to proven that, and I've done it over and over again. And I look forward to continuing to do so. We have to stand up for what's best for all Americans. And that's what I will continue to do.
And Janelle, sort of part of that question, Oregon, which bills itself as the model for voter registration, recently showed that there are non-citizens being added to the voter registration rolls after all, even if only a tiny percentage, only 2 have been shown to have voted. Do you think a federal law requiring documentation for voter registration is merited?
Well, I called for an investigation of what happened, and I think it's better to understand exactly what happened before you go and go from 0 to 60. So that I think is actually wise lawmaking, and it's not pandering to any particular group. But I think calling for an investigation is the right thing to do there. What I also think is really important is that Oregonians have said time and time again that they do not want to engage in any form of voter suppression. So it is vitally important that we protect our access to the ballot, but we want to make sure that people know that they can vote safely and securely, and that is unquestioned. On the other issue that we're talking about in terms of shutdowns, as a business person, I understand that when risk is introduced into an equation, it makes everybody nervous, number one, and it drives up the cost of doing business. So This idea that we can keep starting and stopping, starting and stopping. Is the government going to stay open? Are we going to inherit the risk of a government shutdown? That to me is not leadership for the American people. Why can't we make sure that we have this done one time, pass the resolution, pass whatever we need to pass, and keep the American people feeling safe and secure that their government is going to be there when they need it?
Great, thank you. Janelle, if you can go first on this question, would you push for federal legislation establishing a national right to abortion?
Absolutely.
And what would be, do you have any specific parameters in mind?
I think Oregon is a model, and Oregonians have said it time and time again that access to abortion, reproductive care is important to them. This is not just a Democrat issue. This is across the board, across the political spectrum. The government has no place in the exam room with the woman when it comes to her body. Has absolutely no place.
Thank you. And Lori, when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, you lauded the decision and tweeted that it's time to pass legislation like the heartbeat bill. Do you support a federal law banning abortion after a certain number of weeks?
No. Pre-Dobbs, post-Dobbs, very different set of circumstances. The Supreme Court has ruled that this is a states' rights issue. Oregon has said over and over again that they have it codified in their law that a woman has access to abortion. I'm not going to do anything to change that. As a matter of fact, I've been supportive and keeping a federal ban anywhere off the floor. HR 7 was going to come to the floor. I went to them and said, I will not stand for that. I will not support that. So we've moved through. It's back to states' rights. And in Oregon, people have said they want access to abortion. And in Oregon, I think most people recognize that they can have that at any moment that they so choose. And there's nothing that I'm going to do, and my record has proven that since I've been in Congress.
Why is this an issue that should be left to the states? Why is this something that should be dependent on what state you live in?
Well, that's what the Supreme Court ruled. It's out of our jurisdiction at the federal level. It is at the states' rights level, and that's where it's going to be held. And in Oregonians, and there's nothing I'm going to do to fundamentally change what Oregonians have expressed over and over again, that they want access to abortion.
But it's not actually out of Congress's hands. In fact, it could be directly in Congress's hands if they decide to take up federal legislation. So is that something that you would support? Would you support actually establishing a national right to abortion?
At this moment, the Supreme Court has ruled it is not in our jurisdiction. I will not step in the way of Oregonians having access to abortion. I will not support a federal ban.
Okay, and can you explain why you feel like it's not in your jurisdiction? The Supreme Court didn't say that Congress can't pass a law. What they did is they overturned and established a precedent.
Right. They overturned Roe. It is now Dobbs. It has come back to the Supreme Court ruled that is going back to the states' rights, and states have access to choosing what laws they want to have on the books. Oregons have expressed and codified in their law that they would like an access to abortion at any moment in time, in state, out of country, taxpayer funded. And that's what Oregonians have expressed. I'm not going to get in the way of that.
Okay, but it's not out of Congress's hands at all to actually take action.
At this moment, Congress is not taking that issue up. It is back to the states' rights, and I am not going to step in the way fundamentally of Oregonians' access to what they want and what they have expressed over and over again.
Okay.
What she's saying is that she's not going to be a champion for women's reproductive rights, which Oregonians have said time and time again, that is what they want representing them. Lori Chavez-DeRemer kind of tricked people into believing that she was a pro-choice champion and she was going to go to Congress and fight for these rights. You're hearing her walk a very fine line, trying not to trip up. Trying to tell you, oh, I'm not going to stand in the way. But honey, we need a champion. We need a champion for our daughters. You're going to have a grandbaby. You're going to be thinking about what does their future look like. I know my daughter and her friends are looking around the country when they wanted to go to graduate school. They were looking for states where their reproductive rights would be protected. When they're looking for jobs, they're looking for places where their reproductive rights will be protected.
Wants to continue to fearmonger. I am raising young women. Janelle Bynum knows that I am not getting in the way of Oregonians' reproductive rights. here is the thing. I have supported over the counter, and I will continue to support women in their
Oh,
efforts.
I'm not gonna do
And
that.
so if she would like to continue to interrupt, that's fine with her, but I am not going to get in the way of what Oregonians have expressed.
You're not a champion.
And Lori, let me ask you, if you can go first on this question. Last year, House Republicans' inability to elect a speaker on two separate occasions ground activity to a halt, including a 3-week stretch last October. And again, the question of whether to retain House Speaker Johnson came up this year as well. What do you tell Oregonians who are really turned off by that kind of chaos and think that Republicans can't don't have the public's best interests at heart when they get involved in these paralysis-inducing arguments?
Well, certainly we have to rise above that. And again, I work on supporting Oregon, and I've stepped out of that to make sure that I'm working across the aisle. As a matter of fact, I think I overheard Congresswoman Salinas last night say that, it's dysfunctional for Republicans to be in charge, but she's been on so many bipartisan bills. I pride myself on working across the aisle. There's nobody's going to say here that because Washington sometimes is dysfunctional, that this isn't a local race. This is what people get tired of. They get tired of the infighting. They get tired of the name calling. They want to make sure that we're working across the aisle. And I've done everything I can and will continue to do to make sure that people recognize that when I'm fighting for housing, when I'm fighting for public safety, when I'm fighting for Oregonians, when it comes to the cost of living, when I'm fighting for keeping fentanyl off the streets, I'm doing that with my colleagues across the aisle. So, we have a speaker, Speaker Johnson. It was unfortunate that when Kevin McCarthy was moved across because of the extremism, which I do not buy into, it was about keeping the government open, which he chose to do, and I supported that, because you have extremists of 7 or 8 Republicans, and then the entire Democratic caucus decide that they wanted to oust the speaker as well, because they voted for that. You can't blame it all on one side, but I'm going to rise above that. I'm not going to continue down the road of the continuous infighting that so many people like to do. I find what Oregonians want. I be policy forward, center forward to get things done.
And Janelle, the Democratic Party certainly has its spectrum of views as well. Where would you fall within that spectrum, and how would you try to avoid the Democratic Party falling into the same kind of intra-party fighting as we've seen among Republicans?
Well, I think leadership matters, and the type of leadership Lori Chavez-DeRemer and Republicans have shown is like when you flip on the light and you see a bunch of mice scurry. Like, it's just a whole bunch of scurrying, but it's not a whole lot of doing. I think what you've seen from Leader Jeffries and Whip Clark, and even Representative Annie Custer with the New Dems, you see people who are interested in practical solutions and moving this country forward. Not a whole lot of scurrying, not a whole lot of back and forth, Marjorie Taylor Greene, not a whole lot of theatrics like that set of people, but people who are really interested in getting the work done for the people.
And let me also just ask, Kurt Schrader, who was very much a moderate Democrat, he represented a previous iteration of this district for 12 years. Your voting record in the Oregon legislature would suggest that you're definitely to his left. Can you name situations in which you have taken taken opposite stances, Democrats, or stood with Republicans on issues?
Well, my work on public safety was a blend of what Republican leaders wanted to have and what Democratic leaders wanted to have. And I was very intentional about making sure, and this was the work done right after George Floyd. I was very intentional about making sure that my vice chair on the Judiciary Committee, Representative Noble, had full red line capability of anything that I proposed, and I had full red line capability of anything he proposed. And I think the beauty of having 23 or so bills come out of that time period, the beauty of having bipartisan legislation, the beauty of having the chiefs and sheriffs praise the work that I did, I think speaks to the fact that I'm about practical solutions. I'm not about politics. I have 4 children. I care deeply about their ability to walk outside and just be free. And I know that what works for Portland doesn't necessarily work for Albany. And so at the state level and even at the federal level, we try to do the things that make make a meaningful difference in people's lives, but they don't pick winners and losers.
And Lori, if you can address the question about times where you've stood against Republicans or voted with Democrats.
Well, thank you, but I'm going to have to counter what Representative Bynum just said. She couldn't be farther from the truth on the judiciary and supporting law enforcement and public safety. I'm endorsed by OreCops, the largest public safety union in the state of Oregon, and emphatically, they do not support Representative Bynum because of exactly her stance in judiciary, where she supported Measure 110. She was the instrumental and has a front row seat to the public
That's a
policy
mischaracterization, and I won't let you continue saying that.
Has continued down this road where people are suffering, and that's why we're seeing the addiction crisis that we're seeing.
That was a voter-approved measure.
That we are
that was failed by the state and local government.
Actually, if you can hold on, Janelle, and then you can
But
respond.
I won't let her lie. So we can have a difference of opinion, but I won't let her lie.
It was a voter approved measure. Certainly a lot of people, I think we would like our recommendation on that back. But I would like it
in listening to Judiciary Committee hearings where they begged her to not take the tools out of the hands of law enforcement, to not let them do their job. I've done everything I can at the federal level to make sure that we're getting a handle on the fentanyl crisis and the opioid crisis that we're seeing, the Fend Off Fentanyl Act, the Halt Fentanyl Act. I've had discussions with our law enforcement, and they emphatically do not support Representative Bynum because of her work in dismantling public safety and law enforcement. So she has been in the driver's seat on this issue, and the Oregonians are suffering every single day because of it. She has also supported rioters and rapists. And
that is an absolute lie, and I will continue talking until you stop, because you will not misrepresent my record. You absolutely will not misrepresent my record. And you won't go into fear mongering. I'm sorry, Helen, this will not happen.
I would like, okay, so in terms of that statement, Janelle, if you want to respond quickly. I guess I'm unclear about the supporting rapist part.
Well, there was a vote in the legislature.
That is not true.
Well, I want to hear kind of where
will not
what this is.
Women to continue down the road of statute of limitations that she voted from it being from 7 years to 5 years. So she'd rather support the criminal, and she can defend that if she would like to. I would like to hear your response to that, to how you voted on that bill. It was, if I understand correctly, it was about extending the statute of limitations for which someone could or the state could press charges, criminal charges.
No, that is not true.
Okay.
There was a gap in the civil rights portion of it. And what is really important for Lori Chavez-DeRemer to remember is that a person like me will stand up for everyone's constitutional rights. And when there are gaps in the law, we have to be bold enough to say this is wrong. You know that you are fear-mongering. You're like that boyfriend that doesn't want to do anything but picks a fight right before Valentine's Day or your birthday, so they never have to do anything. And the longer you can keep the person in fear or keep them upset, you never have to produce. My record on public safety is strong, and let me tell you why. I make sure that not only do we talk about supporting and actually support law enforcement, I put money forth for Oregon State Police to have a wellness package. I made sure that they had the tools and techniques that they needed to protect us during times of riot. I made sure that not one bill passed that wasn't bipartisan and didn't have Ron Noble's support.
And why are
that is very clear. The second part is making sure that and the second part is making sure that everyone's constitutional rights are always protected, and the government doesn't get to pick who wins and who loses.
The public loses.
That is the fundamental question here. When you get a chance to tell your story before a jury or before a judge, that is the time when the winner and the loser is picked. It is not for me to do that. And what you and others will try to do is to continue very racist tropes about the threats of Black people, Black men, Black women, Black children. so that we can continue in this country to have uneven outcomes. And I will not let you do it.
Lori, do you want to respond real quickly, or shall we move on to the next question?
Well, again, my final answer to that is if she has done so many things, why are where we are today in our public safety? Why is crime on the streets risen? Why has law enforcement endorsing Representative Bynum for her 9 years of work that she has said she has done? Why are they not endorsing her? I can tell you why, because they do not believe her and they do not trust her, and she has not come out in support of them with her legislation.
Okay, and Lori, if you can go first on this question about immigration, what changes do you want to see on immigration? And would you have supported the compromise bill that Republicans and Democratic senators have been working on before it got voted down?
Well, it didn't get voted on. So for clarity, we had HR 2, the most comprehensive border security that we voted on in the House, which I supported. That was not taken up by the Senate. It sat there well, it's still sitting there. And then the Senate came up with a bill that I didn't have the opportunity to vote on. But rather than let it stand still, I worked with my colleagues again across the aisle on a bipartisan bill called the Defending Border, Defending Democracies Act, which secured the border as well as defending all borders. Work with my colleagues across the aisle to get that done. And it's actually what the framework was for supporting the National Defense Authorization Act. So the NDAA, that was the framework that was used. Securing our border is fundamentally what we need to do. We need to know who's coming across the border. And for Oregonians, we are a border state. I visited the border twice, once in Texas and once in Arizona. And what we're seeing, and after having briefings with the FBI here in Oregon, we are seeing the fentanyl crisis be an issue that is everyday affected Oregonians. Also, I'm on the Dignity Act because we do need to treat our immigration and our border security at the same time. And so again, another bipartisan bill, the Dignity Act, because we are a nation of immigrants. Again, my great-grandmother's family came from Mexico. I understand how important this is. So I'm working on both bills as we move through this process. So yes, it's been a priority. We have as we move through, and I've been on both of those to support. So it's mischaracterization that we voted on that. We didn't get to vote on the Senate bill, and so I brought forth my own bill.
Right, but the Senate bill, from what I understand, that was killed in large part because Trump pressured Republican senators not to let it go forward out of a desire to not give the Biden administration a win. Is that pressure something that you could stand up to? I mean, is that something that you think should have gone forward?
Actually, this is standing up to bringing my own bill forward. If I don't have an opportunity to vote on something, I can't negotiate that, right? A negotiated bill on both sides is important. And that's why I went with my colleagues across the aisle to bring another border security package, but I couldn't vote on the Senate bill. It was not brought to the floor.
And Janelle, what would you support in terms of immigration policy?
Well, I think Lori's record on public safety is a bit fake, and she has done just like we saw with reproductive health care access. She's doing like this. Oh, well, I couldn't do anything because Lord, I couldn't show up. Lord, I couldn't do anything because they didn't bring it forth. Oh, I couldn't do anything. And so what I think is really important is to just highlight the fact that focusing on one half of a story of public safety, of which the border is our concern on public safety, focusing on one half of it only tells a very small part of the story, and it doesn't lead us to strong solutions. So number one, thinking about just enforcement. That doesn't tell us about what are the promises this country holds for people, but it also doesn't really get us to the point where we're actually having conversations about not just fentanyl, because fentanyl is the drug of today, but we're not talking about what's the super drug of tomorrow. So we're trying to make sure that we talk about the border, we talk about public safety to get people riled up, but there are no real solutions that honestly should have been on the table and should have been passed by now. And Lori Chavez-DeRemer hasn't done anything but done like this.
Except my record proves differently. And on the immigration, the Dignity Act, that's what I just mentioned to you, so that there's a pathway to citizenship. I've been working on that on a bipartisan basis and will continue to do so.
If it was strong, it should have moved.
And Janelle, this question goes to you first. What action on gun safety would you support? National safe storage laws, raising the minimum age for establishing a national minimum age for semi-automatic weapons. What are some of the aspects that you would or policies you would push for?
This is really hard because I'm a kid who grew up in a neighborhood that was challenged with gun violence and drugs, quite honestly. And to think that our children today really haven't moved past having to do lockdown drills in school, haven't been able to be kept safe from semi-automatic weapons. I think a semi-automatic weapons ban is appropriate. And I am very interested in working with advocacy groups like Moms Demand in every town to limit the number of future opportunities people have to harm our children. So for me, it is an open book. I've been supportive of all the gun control laws that we've had proposed in our state. And I'm going to continue supporting things like making sure that the boyfriend ban, the boyfriend loophole is closed, making sure that, again, that our children are kept safe in school. I don't believe that Republicans should continue normalizing the loss of life and the attempted loss of life on people who are not fit to be carrying guns. I mean, the attempt on the president's life yesterday, or somewhat of an attempt, was not okay. And the previous attempt was not okay. And then, one of his cronies, Elon Musk, making light of it, that's not okay.
Lori, same question for you. What action on gun safety or what policies would you support? What kind of legislation would you want to see?
Well, certainly any attempt on loss of life, anybody who has a felony record, making sure that we have the transactional, 4473 is important as a transactional record about who is purchasing a weapon to make sure that they have, any sort of sidearm, that they are having no criminal background. We have to make sure of that while still protecting our Second Amendment rights. And that's important in our Constitution to protect those. So we will move through this process. We want to make sure that our kids are safe at all costs. And we have to address this through our mental health crisis and making sure that we're having these wraparound services. I have focused on our mental health and our drug addiction and how we're protecting our families and children. When you talk to the families who have been affected by any sort of senseless gun violence, one of the things that they're asking for is making sure that we're paying attention to our schools, making sure we're paying attention to mental health. When are we going to finally come down and address that issue as opposed to directly affecting law-abiding citizens? So I am willing to always move through this process, but we want to make sure that our kids are protected at all costs.
So if I remember correctly, and I might not be, the man who attempted to kill former President Trump in Pennsylvania did not have a criminal background. Is there, I mean, he used an AR-15. Is that something that, for instance, you would have supported any kind of ban or increasing the age of ownership or anything along those lines?
Well, again, this is where we're talking about mental health. Again, this young gentleman, the one yesterday, the same assassination attempt on the former president. These are mental health questions that we have to address. We have to be able to assess and deal with that, not only on a local basis, a statewide basis. We have to make sure that we're targeting that early. And again, a law-abiding citizen is not going to fall in that same category. And we want to make sure that we have the safety is in place for any sort of criminal record, and then addressing the mental health. Two different things, but certainly affecting this country that we have to have this constant conversation for. And it's unfortunate that where we are today, political violence, criminal violence on our young families, we have to make sure that we continue this conversation, and mental health is going to be at the top of my list for those.
And you have a lot of faith that increased mental health services is going to prevent these kinds of incidents from happening.
Well, it can't hurt, right? We have to make sure that we're addressing it. I mean, every one of these acts has been tied to mental health. And if we don't address that, we're not going to get anywhere. We have to make sure that when we have, I think the gentleman who in Butler had a history where he was identified. We're seeing that where we have to do that early. We have to speak often and speak loudly. We have to protect our young people. We have to protect Americans, but we also have to protect our Second Amendment.
Thank you. And Laura, if you can go first on this question, do you think that the United States needs to cut spending? And if so, where would you look to make cuts or raise revenue?
Oh, well, gosh. Well, raising revenue is a great starting point. We want to make sure that we have American jobs. We want to make sure that our businesses are supported. We want to make sure that our small businesses are supported and that they're not overregulated and overtaxed, because they are the building blocks of America. And we have to make sure that, again, at the Trump tax cuts, we want, what we don't want to do is separate people from their hardworking dollars. That's what's happening. Overtaxation, overregulation. And so we want to be supportive of that. And any way the federal government can come in and make sure that that our businesses are supported, we can do that by cutting the regulatory framework. We have to make sure permitting reform, when we're talking about housing and the economy, that people have that. We want to make sure that we have good labor jobs. You mentioned earlier, what could I do to support good American labor jobs? And how would I be different than my party? I signed on to the PRO Act. I have made sure that, again, I mentioned earlier, endorsed by 19 labor unions. Why? Because if I support labor, they will support somebody who walks it. This is not a partisan issue. This has to be something where we can have mortgage paying jobs, that we can support young people, support apprenticeships, so that they feel like they can stay either in the communities that they have been educated in, live in, and can work in, and not have to pick up and move. As far as cutting the Fiscal Responsibility Act, we voted on last year to cut $2.1 trillion over the next 10 years is important. Yes, we have $36 trillion in debt in this country, and pretty soon that is going to be out of hand, and we're going to be relying on China and Russia. We have to make sure that we're looking at national security issues as well. It's a lot of these things that we're briefed on, and we're making sure if we don't lower energy costs, we're never going to lower the costs of our everyday living. I want to make sure that we're supportive of those things, as well as protecting the environment. So there are so many avenues, but we have to grow our economy. We cannot tax our way out of it. We have to make sure that everybody has a job that they have access to right in their home communities, and education is also going to be relying upon that, and then cutting our wasteful spending. So I've been on board with all of these. Again, these are bipartisan issues, which is why I'm on the Problem Solvers. We make this job a lot harder than it has to be if we would just continue to have these conversations on policy-driven, center-forward. We will get the things done that we need to do to make Americans feel at ease with their everyday living conditions.
Thank you. And Janelle, same question for you. Do you think that the U.S. needs to cut spending? And if so, where would you look to make cuts, or to alternatively raise additional revenue?
Well, I think it's really important for us to consider that every American and every American business, and business that does business here on our shores, pays their fair share. And that's what Oregonians around the fifth district have told me, where they're working, paying their fair share, but then other people, other entities are not. And so I think this is where the negotiation comes in about what is a fair share, whether it's taxing unearned income, or whether it's eliminating the Trump tax cuts. I think those are all up for discussion. The second point that I wanted to make is that we know that under the Republicans, the PRO Act will never pass. And Lori Chavez-DeRemer very clearly used language that I thought was really, really interesting. She said she signed on to the PRO Act. And I know what signed on means. It means I put my name on something I know will never pass. Like I said on reproductive health care options, we need champions. We don't need people to just sign on. We need champions. We don't need people to just write bills and say that they're bipartisan. We need champions, people who can actually move policy and get things done for the American people.
Well, I'm endorsed by 19 labor unions who I have met with, who I have supported, who I have stood on the picket line with, who I have supported for safety, supported for American wage jobs that they can pay their mortgages with. I have signed on to apprenticeship programs. I've signed on to PLAs. I have signed on to all of those things. You know why? Because they trust me and they believe me, and I will walk the walk and continue to do so.
Because
Again,
you signed on because I'm
my,
on your heels.
my
Because when you
record
saw
will
me coming, you actually had to start trying to do something. It wasn't just a show horse job anymore. You actually had to try to become a workhorse.
my
That is why you signed on.
my
Let's
record
just be clear about what you're doing. You're signing on,
My
and we
record will
know
prove
you'll never
differently.
pass the
I
PRO
sit
Act.
in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It's been important to the airline pilots. It's been important to our rail unions. It's been important on agriculture. It's been important on education and workforce. I have worked hard on all of these committees to be, again, one of the most bipartisan members of Congress in the Oregon delegation and the second most bipartisan member of Congress. That's because I walk the walk, not just talk the talk. My
You
record.
may be bipartisan. I don't agree, but you're not effective.
So I think, thank you both. What I'd like to do is wrap it up with both of you getting a couple minutes to tell us and tell voters why you think they should vote for you. I forgot where we landed, but Janelle, if you can go. Oh, yeah, Janelle, if you go first on this, and then Laura, you can wrap up.
Did I go first?
I think
Okay. All
initially
right.
it was.
Okay. Well, thank you for this opportunity today to bring contrast to my record versus Lori Chavez-DeRemer's record. As I mentioned before, I'm a mother of four: Christine, Ellis, Caroline, and Asa, 22, 20, 16, and 14. I'm a mother right at the edge of at the kitchen table issues. I am an electrical engineer. I understand technical problems. I understand how to pull apart problems and how to piece back together solutions. I have served with honor in the Oregon State Legislature for the last 8 years, being a leader on a variety of rights, including labor, including civil rights, including making sure that our children have something to look forward to with respect to the economy. I've been there at the table for the residents of Oregon's 5th Congressional District, and I will continue to be a champion for the issues that they want us to work on. Not just someone who signs on to bills, but a champion. And that is what they can count on me for. Thank you.
Thank you. And Laura, if you can close us out.
Well, thank you again for today. I think it's important for voters to understand the differences between myself and my opponent. You know, as a former mayor, as a mom, as a business owner, and now a member of Congress, you know, it's important to get in there and work across the aisle. It's important to build that bipartisan record and be a leader in that space. Whether we're talking about the environment, whether we're talking about water, wildfires, labor, jobs, the economy, public safety. These are the things that Oregonians care about, and I'll continue to fight for them. You know, we have to make sure that we're focused from the bottom up. And I've made a promise to Oregon's 5th Congressional District that I would continue down that road of being pragmatic and thoughtful. That won't change despite what anybody else has to say. Again, anybody who knows me, anybody who will continue to work with me, I promise you, I will continue to lead on Oregonians' behalf. And it's really been an honor to serve my country in this way. And I look forward to serving again and being the voice for Oregon's 5th Congressional District for the next 2 years. And I can't thank you all enough for doing what you all do to highlight the issues that are important to Oregonians every single day. So thank you. We'll bring it home, and I look forward to serving you again.
Great. Thank you both for your time. We really appreciate the conversation. We'll be in touch if we have any more questions, but we do hope to start coming out with our endorsements starting actually as soon as Sunday. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the